Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another of our webinar Wednesdays hosted by Cal State Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. It is February 11th, 2026, and this is Webinar Wednesday edition number 371. And we are live at the World Ag Expo in Tulare, California, talking about agriculture in the San Joaquin Valley. Got a great guest today, Dr. Hegde. And he'll be around in just a few minutes after we get through our introduction. So let's get on with it. Well, maybe I'm looking today for that old bumper sticker, Ag is my bag. And we are live right now from the Bank of America Women's Pavilion. They're on at Tulare for the World Ag Expo. Us old timers, we know it as the Tulare Farm Show, but really it's the central of the agricultural universe with all kinds of great things going on here. And we want to talk today about a lot of the agricultural importance in the San Joaquin Valley. So we're going to be talking about the economic impact that agriculture has not only on the Central Valley, but more specifically on what the San Joaquin Valley has in hold. We'll talk about our capital quarter, which will focus on, of course, a lot of the financial programs and agricultural programs. We'll jump to our economic corner, another one of our usual features. Those are regular features here on Webinar Wednesday. Our economic corner, I'm going to have my guest join me on that because, after all, in his day job, he is an economist. So we'll jump into that, talk about a little bit more about agriculture. Manufacturing assistance to guide you, that gets covered a little bit today because we will be looking at some of the processing aspects in agriculture, some of the value-added processing aspects that are joining agriculture. So that gets covered. Any questions that you have, please go to our Q&A box and pop in a question. We will take questions at the end of today's webinar. And oftentimes we have a poll, but being remote, no poll today. And I had some good poll questions too. Maybe I'll drop one in next week just for good measure. So no poll question today, but on with some of the content that we have here today. And jumping right in, kind of moving things around a bit, we're going to jump right into the capital quarter. And our capital quarter is our regular feature on how small businesses can access capital, what you can do to get money for your particular venture. I haven't talked much about my favorite bill. A lot of people have a favorite bill. Maybe it's your uncle bill. Maybe it's your big, beautiful bill. But, this is my favorite. The wonderful $100,000 bill with Woodrow Wilson, vintage 1935. Estimated value of this, if you have one of these beauties today, is about $2.5 million. But it is obviously the cover page for our capital quarter. And we're going to jump into some of the agricultural lending programs that SBDCs can assist you with. So on the production side of things, generally with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they break it, the business side or the agricultural side, into two areas. One is your U.S. Farm Service. Your U.S. Farm Service covers the production side. So what it takes to acquire a piece of land for agriculture. Obviously agriculture requires patience as far as capitalization to where, there's a lot of things as far as lines of credit that can really assist a lot of the people out there. So a lot of what we see with production side of agriculture is, the production loans in order to plant the crop and to bring it to fruition in harvest, usually in summer and fall. So depending on the crop, anything from, say, tree nuts, which could be a lot of the irrigation and a lot of the fertilization and a lot of the pesticide work that goes on throughout the year, and then harvest. So a lot of those are done by the U.S. Farm Service. So your Farm Service is where to go on the production side of things. And they also have some options with new and beginning farmer programs. And a lot of these come in and out. And they do change. And so we're interesting to see what is going to happen this year with the production side of agriculture and what is going on with new and beginning farm programs. The new and beginning farm programs originate from generally an issue that is, a lot of the farmers are second, third generation. A lot of them are older, and a lot of the younger kids want to get into something other than farming. A lot of, which is true in a lot of industries. If you grow up in the restaurant industry, oftentimes you don't want to be a restaurateur. So we get that. So in order to maintain, food security and really something really important to all of us, and that is some great crops. So the new and beginning food programs offer that. So also many of the other options on the production and commodity side are specialty crops. And so specialty crops are a lot of what we see in the San Joaquin Valley and in California. So not a lot of the wheat, corn, and soybeans that you see historically in the eastern part. So just on the manufacturing side of things for food processors, they do get covered by one SBA program. And so we will talk about, an SBA program or two before we get into the USDA stuff. But the MARC is a program that is for manufacturers, and obviously ag manufacturers that take a crop and process that is a manufacturing process. So this is a new program in which is a line of credit program, and really kind of moves to a lot of the, true manufacturing aspects of what ags are and taking it from the commodity to the finished product. So that is a program that the SBDC can help you with. And again, it is an acronym, the MARC. And again, that is a line of credit program for manufacturers to help them either expand their working capital or leverage some of their equity into existing facility and equipment. Another SBA program that can at times, but not often, really kind of work out toward not really the production side, but it can work for ag businesses that are doing production, and that is their disaster loans. And a lot of the disasters that are going on, not a lot that are going on there, but there is a particular program that is open right now on the disaster side of things. And it's in the Eastern Sierra and Mono County for winter storms that were affected. And these actually impacted a lot of businesses right around Christmas in the Mono County area, specifically June Lakes and Lee Vining. But not a lot of ag processing going on there. But there is a lot of ag processing going on with programs from the USDA rural agricultural programs. And one of their bellwether lending programs is for communities that are generally have a population of 50,000 or less. And oftentimes what they will do is they will work in the rural communities in order to provide economic development support and other things as well. And one of the things is their B&I program, also called their Business and Industry Loan Program. And this can go for a lot of good uses. It's a guaranteed loan program that is made by a bank, and the USDA on qualifying projects will come in and they will guarantee that particular loan. Now, this can be in rural communities. It can be shopping centers. It could be other commercial aspects of it. So there's a lot of things that can actually happen and a lot of things that go into place for those particular B&I programs. USDA Rural Agriculture also has some loan and grant programs in rural areas. And they have one of the programs that we talk about and is about ready to open called the Value Added Producer Grants. And basically, this is the grant program that is oftentimes around $30 million in total amount that is dedicated for those that are taking a commodity that they produce, adding value to it, and then selling it. Now, for me, the easiest example I can give you is going to be, say, wine consumption. Maybe it's a winery or winery brand or a grape growing region or whatever. So, but it can be basically any commodity and any type of actual facility that is used for it. But right now, it is open like for a short period each year. And the FOMO, which is the federal notice of funds that are going to become available, says that it's coming soon. So it is really something that I think a lot of our local small growers in the San Joaquin Valley could take advantage of and don't. And there are planning grants and there are working capital grants to help you get this information and get information out to customers about how you've taken that commodity and you've improved it and actually are selling it. So again, the value added producer grants are something that is really, I think, something we'd love to talk to you about if you think that once it opens, it's something that you can benefit from. So one of the things also in actually the value-added producer grant is one of the things that I think is absolutely fantastic is the fact that it's an opportunity that works really with the small producers. So it can work with very small producers. So I'm going to skip this for a little bit later because I think a couple of my slides might have got out of place, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But we will be talking soon at a webinar near you, and I'm pretty certain that's going to be Webinar Wednesday, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of the authors of the Kern Economic Journal, which is a publication that focuses on agriculture in the San Joaquin Valley. And there's a new issue coming out, and when that comes out, we're going to showcase that. This is one of my favorite issues going back to the third quarter of 2024, because it really shows the Kern County in a nutshell. It shows your two biggest industries working side by side with energy and agriculture combined in that particular picture. But stay tuned, we'll have more on that later. One thing here at the SBDC is we're trying to provide you with AI solutions in 2026. And we're doing that throughout agriculture as well. So there's an opportunity for you to work with our lead advisors on potentially an AI project that benefits your particular business. So contact me. There's my email address at the bottom there. And we'll get one of our teams working with you of experienced SBDC advisors paired with our CSUB student interns for support on that. Some of the things coming up on our community calendar segment, for those of you that are interested in maybe starting ag processing or ag manufacturing, there is a webinar coming up next week, or excuse me, that's tomorrow, on actually cutting the red tape, something that's very important to the Made in America initiative through the Small Business Administration. And who doesn't want to cut the red tape in California? I know, give me the scissors, I'm ready to go. So that'll be available tomorrow through the U.S. Small Business. Our producer, Maureen Busherdang, will have all the wonderful stuff in our chat box for this particular webinar and others. And then coming up a couple of weeks after that will be how to start the manufacturing business. So really a detailed overview of 10 steps involved in launching a small-scale food processing venture of your own. So there's that possibility coming up, and that'll be on February 26th. So stay tuned for that particular aspect coming up as well. You know, at the SBDC, we like to talk about our tools that our SBDC team has to assist your business. And there's a variety of tools that are available. And it starts off with our no-cost advising from senior and seasoned professionals, and our student advisory team also working with you on particular tools. But there's some great tools here that we talk about all the time. You know, everything from Live Plan, the business planning tool, to risk management solutions through the risk management field book. And also, you know, some of the things that are available through other aspects as well, and some other tools that we have from resource partners, such as our vertical IQ industry analysis tool that we'll talk about on an upcoming webinar coming here to you. So a lot of the SBDC tools in the toolbox available to clients. If you're not, sign up. We'll have the link. Sign up to be an SBDC client and take advantage of those particular tools. One of our favorites, obviously, is our CSUB SBDC YouTube channel. And every webinar that we do tries to end up in the particular toolbox and tries to end up on our YouTube channel. So this one should hit probably around 3 or 4 days after our live February 11th, 2026 date. So look for that. You can go there and subscribe and choose how you want your webinar Wednesday delivered to you. And to really look at some of our favorite archive, and really one of them, and it's a webinar that's a couple of years old now. Maureen will have this for you, but it's really one of my favorites on this particular subject. It was a couple of individuals from the U.S. World Development and featured the now retired Dan Johnson, who is a fixture for agriculture in the southern San Joaquin Valley, our USDA representative for so many years here in Kern County. Dan was on also 3 years ago, and Sandra Pedrati, who talked about her position as the statewide value-added producer grant, and she talked about that in great detail. So really, if you want more information on it, go into our YouTube channel and reference. It's 3 years old, so there could be some dated information. There could be some changes that have happened, but it gives you such a great basis and background for taking advantage and finding these grant resources for you to use in your business here in Kern County and the San Joaquin Valley. And to contact us, to sign up for our services, there's our website, csubsbdc.com. Go click on and sign up for confidential, no cost, no obligation expert consulting. And we will pair a consultant to meet your particular need and go from that particular point forward. And speaking about moving forward, you know, our special guest today, I call him a very good friend of mine, Dr. S. Aaron Hegde. Now, you don't expect the leading agricultural official at Cal State Bakersfield to be positioned here with a bow tie and a tuxedo. And I will work on that. I will get him a picture for his next appearance on Webinar Wednesday, especially when we're here live in Tulare. He'll look a little different at the World Ag Expo. But I think it's going to be sporting more of a Stetson, some Wranglers, maybe a denim jacket. But anyway, enough of that. He is the professor of economics and former chair of the economics department, and he is the executive director of the university's Grimm Family Center for Agricultural Business, a center providing opportunities for student research and field experience, creation, innovation, and technology. Dr. Hegde will be back later this year. He's got a lot of great things that are going on at Cal State Bakersfield. I don't know if he can talk about it today, but if not, he'll come back and talk about it later. But stay tuned for 2026. It's going to be an exciting year of agriculture at Cal State Bakersfield. Dr. Hegde serves on the board of several ag-related entities, and he has close to 20 years experience as a runner. For those of you that don't know what a runner is, it's our mascot at CSUB, the Road Runner. Dr. Hegde, thank you for joining us, and come on in here. Let's take it away. So here we are, live at the Ag Expo.
Thank you, Professor Bearden. As you see, I'm dressed, as you said, ready for ag.
Yeah, so it's on me for using an old stock photo of you in fancier times. But one of the things that, you know, as we bring you in here, that I want to do now is I want to talk about a couple of the issues and questions. This is a little different than we normally do things. But, you know, that's how we roll on Webinar Wednesday. We do things a little differently some days. And so really what I want to talk about is the few things that I was going to talk about, but it seemed so much better if I brought you in here and had you talk about it. So really what I want to do is I want to share a slide that was presented last year on Webinar Wednesday from Dr. Mark Evans, who is our resident economist here on Webinar Wednesday. He is a colleague of both of ours, and really does some fantastic work. And I was taken really back by this slide when he produced it last year, when he talked about the aggregate agriculture employment in the state of California. And by here, you know, a lot of people will equate the Central Valley as it's really a summation of two valleys, the San Joaquin Valley and the Sacramento Valley. But you really see where the San Joaquin Valley has 7 times the employment than that of the Sacramento Valley. And then other parts of the state, it's even less. You know, when you see a chart like this, what do you think of when you see something like that?
No, this is a great chart, and of course, Dr. Evans is an expert when it comes to finding the data that's important and such. And to me, this says the value of the labor here in the southern San Joaquin Valley, especially. A lot of the crops we grow require a lot of labor. So I think this is the difference you see compared to the crops grown elsewhere, which can be more mechanized and such. And also, the more obvious reason is ag is big here in Kern County and in the San Joaquin Valley. So when you have the three counties, San Joaquin, Kern County, Tulare, and Fresno, these are the three largest counties for ag in California. It's not surprising to see this breakdown for the agricultural employment.
Yeah, and I was even surprised to see the Central Coast having so much more employment. But, you know, you think of the Central Coast as being an ag mecca with the berries, specifically strawberries and a lot of the other berries, particularly artichokes and other crops. But really the Central Coast having such a larger part, more so than the Sacramento Valley as well. So really good work, blew me away with this particular stat. So much that we had to bring it back to the what we call the Tulare Farm Show today. Another one of his slides that we used with permission was this one that really showed a lot of the crops that are exported and to the extent that they are exported and the top importers. So when we look at this, let's start at the top. Almonds are obviously a crop grown throughout the valley, the Central Valley in California, all the way up into the Sacramento Valley as well. But it's surprising that such a large crop that has grown over the last few decades, still 70%, 76% of that is exported.
So that's not surprising because we are the only, California is the only state in the entire United States that actually grows almonds. And we do such a good job between 2.5 billion pounds every year. So we don't consume that much, so it has to be exported. And as you see, some of the crops that are grown exclusively in California have a bigger share of the production that's exported. So like your almonds, pistachios, and even walnuts. So any kind of tree nuts are basically mostly exported since they're not consumed at the rate at which we produce it here.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And looking on it also with pistachios, probably the same thing, very similar. And these are California. So this isn't confined to the Central Valley or more specifically the San Joaquin Valley. Dairy obviously is huge here. It's really ironic here. There's a whole pavilion for dairy and there's a lot of out-of-state entities that look to try to persuade our dairy businesses to leave the state of California. They're there.
A lot of the dairy businesses over the past few years have had increasing regulations. Even with those increasing regulations, our dairy producers are pretty efficient. So they're able to produce it. In fact, people assume that, Wisconsin is the cheese capital of the United States, but it's actually California. We produce more cheese and dairy than Wisconsin does.
Good to know. Good to know. So the last slide Dr. Evans shared from last year was on he referred to as the unauthorized labor force. And it really showed a lot of the labor force in the U.S. and then a number of different states. And with individuals, the percentage of the labor force that wasn't properly authorized to work in the U.S.
Yeah, and the thing about the unauthorized labor force is that they're an estimate because we don't have actual counts for it. So I would even suspect that in California, it's higher than 7% of the labor force, especially in agriculture. We suspect it's between 60 to 70% that is unauthorized labor force. So heavy reliance in California, specifically in the ag industry.
And it does there in the chart show that the industry with the largest percentage of workforce is agriculture. Backbreaking work, for sure. Okay, Dr. Hegde, I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you in here. So you're going to talk a little bit about a number of things today. So Dr. Hegde, stage is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure again to be here. Couldn't be more appropriate to be here in Tulare for the World Ag Expo, the largest such event in the world, literally. So today is the second day. So if anybody's out there is interested, you've got one more day to come here. So I thought we'd focus a little bit on agriculture as we see it here in the San Joaquin Valley and specifically in Kern County. So just an outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'll give you a little bit of a regional snapshot, specifically, the Central Valley, but specifically the San Joaquin Valley, which is the southern part of the Central Valley. Then I'll talk a little bit about the Kern County production value, the ag production, commodity mixes and stuff. And then we look at some key pressures, such as water, climate, markets, labor, and then also look for some opportunities for small businesses as we go ahead. So just a kind of a recap for California ag. As you can see, we grow a lot of commodities here. In fact, more than 400 commodities are grown here in California. The value of that, the most recent most recent crop report is $61.2 billion. That was in 2024. This is the value of this is just the revenue, the sales, not the profit or any of the such things. And then also in 2024, about a third, a little more than a third of the $23.8 billion was exported. And as you saw in the previous table that Kelly showed, some of the crops, a good portion of that is exported outside of the United States. So when you look at California, we grow nearly half of the country's vegetables and over 3/4 of the country's fruits and nuts. And the Central Valley, including Kern County, is a major engine behind these totals. And Kern County, we especially focus on tree nuts, fruits, and some vegetables. I'm not able to. Okay, so just a little quick look at San Joaquin Valley, the most recent production. So you see here the rankings, and these change depending on the price of the commodities, how much water is available, the yield, the acreage, and of course, processing and livestock cycle. So last year, Kern County was a lot more than it is this year, which is about almost $8 billion. And Tulare County is a little over 8 billion. And then of course, Fresno County comes first with a little over 9 billion. So this is the southern part of the Central Valley or the San Joaquin Valley, as you see the big powerhouses, which is where you see the other chart that Kelly showed earlier with a higher percentage of labor be coming from the San Joaquin Valley. So moving on, looking at Kern County specifically, you've got this chart here. You can see that the top product in the 2024 crop report, which typically comes out late September, early October for the previous calendar year. So this is the 2024 crop report, which came out in October of 2025 and is the most recent data that we have. So looking at this, you see that the top 5 commodities are citrus, grapes, carrots, almonds, and pistachios. And on the right side, those are the values from 2024, just a little over $1 billion worth of citrus, grapes, and carrots. And then in the brackets that you see, that's the rank from 2023, the previous crop report, the previous crop year. So that you can see the rankings changed. So grapes were number 1, and then citrus was number 2, and so on and so forth. So again, depending on the price, depending on the yield, and of course, pistachios are something that there's an alternating crop. So one year it's a large crop, but then the next year it's a smaller crop. So looking at the trend, again, as I said, this varies depending on the price and the yields and such. And you can see this over the last 4 years, the value of Kern County ag production kind of goes up and down. And so last year, we were the top producing county, and this year we're number 3. But usually Kern County is within the top 3 every year. So that's a little bit of background on California agriculture and specifically Kern County. So what is constraining us from getting bigger? Well, the most obvious one is obviously water. So surface water, which is the stuff in the rivers and the canals and all of that stuff, the amount that we get varies sharply year to year. Depends on the rainfall, depends on the snowfall and all that. So typically in the past, groundwater has been the buffer. So in years where there's been less surface water, people have tapped into the ground. And we've been blessed in Kern County and San Joaquin Valley with having a very nice aquifer water table. Unfortunately, over the years, as we've had drought years and less water and such, we've kind of overdrawn in some places. And in those places where we've overdrawn some of the water, the pockets which hold these water have collapsed, and the valley floor has been sinking. In some places, it's sunk over 75 to 80 feet just in the last 100 years. So because of that, there's a legislation, or a series of legislation that came out in 2014 called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And it's was passed into law in 2014 to try to manage these withdrawals from the groundwater. The main thing in terms of water is that it's the reliability that drives what crops are chosen to produce. You know, whether somebody wants to grow annual crop versus perennials. And if you look at the production of all the commodities, most of those commodities are permanent crops, which of course always need access to water. And which portions of the valley are producing depends on access to water. So some of the practical implications of the SGMA is there'd be more metering and reporting, tighter pumping allocations, investment in recharge, banking, and conveyance. And of course, what we'll notice is more land use transition in the Southern Central Valley and specifically in the San Joaquin Valley. One example of a land use transition is if a farmer doesn't have access to water, whether surface water or groundwater, then rather than letting the land stay fallow, they typically might convert it into a solar farm. There's a lot of constraints with that, but the idea just is that when the electricity that's produced from the solar farm is sold to the grid, then the farmer gets a portion of that money back. So instead of farming commodities, you're farming the sun. And so you can see the timeline for SGMA by 2040. There should be is the target for sustainability. So currently, every water district and region is working on a plan to try to see how they can be efficient over time in terms of and more sustainable. So some other constraints for agriculture here in the San Joaquin Valley, obviously labor. And as you saw, 50% of the ag labor is in the San Joaquin Valley. So we're talking about a lot of people. And then of course, regulation. And as there's changes in climate, that impacts the rainfall, which impacts the water, but it also impacts the amount of pests there are. So you have to control the pests. So looking at over climate, as there are extreme temperatures, higher temperatures and heat stress, that puts stress on crops as well as workers, right? So in terms of heat protection, heat illness, and all these other stuff, which increases the cost of production. There's also more variability, hence climate change. So some years you'll get some flood, as we did just a few years ago, and other years we get drought. So for the first time in a very long time, California is officially drought-free now because of all the floods and the rains we've gotten. And then, of course, it's an ongoing issue with pests and disease pressures. With climate change also brings these pest issues and stuff. So you need to monitor them and have to have a response for it and things like that. And the other big one, as we saw with the unauthorized labor force and the reliance on it, is this idea of labor availability. The less labor that's available, the higher is the cost of that. Or the alternative is perhaps automation and mechanization, which is not always feasible depending on what commodity you're growing, but is something that, you know, over time will have to be a major concern. And then the food safety. As more laws are put into place, regulations in terms of food safety, then folks have to figure out how to trace the food from the farm to the fork. And of course, the big thing is price volatility, especially for the input prices. In addition to labor, fuel prices vary a lot, fertilizer prices vary a lot. In fact, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and those two are the largest exporters of fertilizer, the price of fertilizer went up, and it's stayed relatively high over the last few years. So given that when we look at the crop reports, they're always the cost at what they call farm gate, which is the cost, which the price at which they sell it. But that does not include all the operating costs and other costs which vary, which is why farming and agriculture is a very risky venture. So from all of that, what are some opportunities for small businesses? Well, put together the slide with a few areas where a small business has some opportunities. So for instance, water efficiency services. With Sigma comes reporting and auditing and stuff. So there could be opportunities in the system audits, looking at leak detection, retrofitting, automation, and such. Then the next move is, again, as we talked about with labor issues, we need to rely more on technology. So the ag tech and data, because the industry is so competitive, the prices, because you're competing at a global level, since majority of our crops are exported. So it's not just the local or the regional price, rather the world price. So we need to try to figure out dashboards for getting the data, analyzing the data. And in fact, that's one of the things we do with our ag business program is train our students with these data analytic skills so that they can help make money for the companies that they work for. And then, of course, there's always like the remote sensing, scouting, and such these other technology out in the field. And then with Sigma and with other regulations, there'll be compliance and reporting. So if you're a small farmer, you may not have the time or the personnel to be able to do all of the reporting that's required, including for food safety and such. So there could be an opportunity for a small business to provide that service to all different kinds of growers. And then, of course, value added and processes, which is something Kelly has talked a lot about at the SBDC and stuff, with the co-packing and cold storage and such. Logistics, another main thing, there are fewer and fewer truck drivers because the average age of the truck drivers is about 53, 54, and not many younger people are going into that industry. You're going to see that there's less and less availability of transportation, which then impacts the supply of parts, as well as managing the equipment, as well as being able to get your product to market. And finally, the last thing, again, we talked about with labor is workforce solutions, trying to find individuals to train them. I think Kelly mentioned this a little earlier. Not many people in the next generation want to get into agriculture. It's a lot of hard work. So finding folks, training them to do that, safety programs, and also managing the existing workforce in scheduling, HR tools, and such things. So these are all some opportunities, I think, for small businesses to work with ag and help out, given the profit margin is so small. So looking ahead for the San Joaquin Valley and agriculture, obviously the Sigma implementation is a big thing, which impacts allocations, the fees, and the water availability in the local markets. And the price of the crops, especially almonds, citrus, and dairy, which are some of our big outputs here in Kern County. And of course, the input costs, as they keep rising, the margin gets smaller and smaller. But under Sigma and with other instances that we see, there's possibilities of recharge projects, conveyance of land transition, solar habitat programs, dust control, and of course, community impacts. And finally, the place where we'll see a lot of changes or impacts is in workforce and compliance requirements. As regulations increase, whether it's in safety or food safety or in reporting, we'll need more workforce and more time complying with the regulations. So my takeaway is the region still is a powerhouse and it remains a powerhouse for agriculture. And this transition creates a real demand for service providers that are nimble, for contractors, technologists, and value-added operators. So, a little bit about the Grimm Family Center for Ag Business. We are a center at CSUB that was endowed by a generous donation from the Grimm family. And we usually have a lot of events open to the community. And so here you'll see a list of events for spring of 2026. And if you scan the QR code, it will take you to our website, which will have more information. And you can also email me if you want more information, Hegde@csub.edu. I'm sure Maureen will put that in there, as well as she'll put in a phone number where you can call to get more information. But the next thing that we have coming up is on February 25th, which is a Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. at CSUB campus at the Walter Stern Library in the December reading room. It's it's a speaker series. It's on the almond industry. So we'll have two individuals who are experts within the almond industry talking about the current state of the almond industry. So please, if you can, join us for that. With that, I will transfer it back to Kelly.
All right. Fantastic stuff, Dr. Hegde. Really, really fun stuff. And we've got time for you to ask questions. You got your questions already, hopefully. We have the professional here, the ag expert in the San Joaquin Valley with us right now, Dr. Hegde from Cal State Bakersfield, largely regarded as the Harvard of the San Joaquin Valley. So now's a good chance. We'll get to some questions in just a few minutes. Actually, we have a few right now, it looks like. Let's start with some of the questions that we have right now. Okay. Let's go with the ones starting with go through here and see, grab any particular ones that you see, Dr. Hegde, that you like. I'm going to grab this one that says, how do you balance value-added work with core farm operations without overstretching resources? Well, I would say get one of the value-added producer grants from USDA for starters. But really, I think it's a balancing act based on, the kind of your business plan that you have with your farming operation. A lot of them are going to be commodity based only, production based, and it's going to be, you're going to be a price taker. Whatever the commodity price for that agricultural commodity is what you're going to get paid. If you're a beef farmer right now, you're pretty happy. Some of the all-time high rates. If you were an egg producer last year, you're happy. So commodity is going to be driven by basically the market and the rules of supply and demand. When you get into the value-added aspect, then you get into things that where you're basically can be more of a price setter, to where you can produce something. You can go produce your almond butter, or really one of the greatest value-added producer products was really kind of almond milk over the last few years, where you took the commodity and produced it into milk that offered a viable solution for those that couldn't actually jump into that. So that's how I would balance it. I would balance it from a standpoint of, if your commodity price is high enough, you're probably less interested in the value aspect side of things. But if not, then there's always, when you add value to something, there's always, hopefully you're adding price and profit as well.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so let's see what we got here. We got a lot more value added, but I want something for Dr. Hegde. Okay. So about that last one, Dr. Hegde, I've heard many times that Ukraine is a leading exporter of fertilizer. Is the chemical or organic fertilizers that they produce? Do you know?
I think it's mostly chemical.
What makes
Not quite organic, but there's always obviously the difference is organic fertilizers cost more, and they may not be as effective as the chemical ones over time. So obviously, when it comes down to production, input costs matter a lot. So already as they're going up, people are less likely to use organic fertilizer.
And also, if you are producing in Ukraine and basically Russia, these fertilizers, or they were the leading producers before the war, then essentially there's some major transportation costs getting it to the US.
Yes.
So it would seem like it would take chemical with maybe processes that require less red tape that are obviously required in California. So maybe that are potential answers. So if you have a question, jump in. We still have time for some more questions. In the meantime, what we'll do is we'll go visit our chat box and see if there are any questions here and see the work done by our producer, Maureen Busher-Dang today. And there's the welcome, greeting and salutations. There's a link for the value-added producer grants. It is going to be opening soon, so maybe we can come back and do something on that before, or maybe when it is open exclusively on that particular project. There's my contact information if you have interest in an AI project using artificial intelligence in your agricultural business or product, or other business for that matter. Information on the two business webinars from the U.S. Small Business Administration on cutting the red tape and starting a manufacturing business. Our YouTube channel there is linked as well. The link to the Grimm Family Center for Agricultural Business. There you go. And also the Google reviews. So a lot in the chat today, no questions that I found there. So heading back over to see if we can pick up a question or two that maybe popped into the Q&A box while we were over there.
Would you like me to add, bring up another constraint, trade issue?
Please do.
So obviously, the data isn't complete yet, the production side of things, but there are access to data on exports. And as you saw, when 70% of the production of a commodity like almonds are exported, we're very dependent on what happens around the world. And so part of it is when we have a tariff, for instance, the tariff is a tax on the good that is imported. That doesn't affect our ag commodities that are exported unless the other country that has the import tariffs on retaliates and puts a tariff on any incoming American goods. Some countries have done that, but not everybody has done that. So when that happens, that raises the price of our commodities to those importing it. In the last year and a half, another thing that has been happening in addition to the tariffs is that the dollar has been losing value. So the dollar has been getting weaker. When that happens, it means that for the foreign consumer, the American good that they're buying becomes cheaper. So the dollar has dropped in value as a higher percentage than the increase in any potential retaliatory tariff the other countries that are faced.
Fascinating.
So when you look at the actual amount of almonds, for instance, exported, that's actually increased over the last year.
Wow.
The total value has also increased because the price at which they were sold were a little higher. So far, we haven't seen the impact of tariff on exports. Of course, we also import things, agricultural commodities. We import from Mexico and from Canada and a few other places. And that would be taxed. And that would also be a higher thing for the consumers, which then would lead to inflation here in the US. So a certain percentage of the increase in inflation in the US can be attributed to tariffs. So in terms of the ag industry, long-term, they might hurt because when you have tariffs, so for instance, the famous example is with soybeans. So you could see the export of soybeans almost grind down to zero when China refused to buy soybeans during the height of the tariff war. And until they had a settlement and China then agreed to buy it, you see essentially the exports of soybeans essentially zero. So now they've agreed to buy a certain amount of soybeans every year. And then you'll see that because of those agreements, the soybeans coming back. But what could happen in the intervening time is if importers are not able to buy it from a particular exporter, they might go to somebody else, like say Argentina or Brazil, and then we might lose that business down the road. So that remains to be seen.
Interesting. Well, definitely a lot of things going on rather than plow the field, plant the seed, water it, and harvest it.
Absolutely.
One thing real quick, just kind of going back a little bit, Dr. Hegde, is kind of going back a little bit on your opportunities. I wanted to just kind of, one of the things that I looked into doing today that I just didn't think we had enough time for was there's this whole industry on specialty foods that really take a lot of the value-added processing. And there's a lot of things that are changing in specialty foods. There's, these huge trade shows that are done 3 times a year. Most recently, they had one on the West Coast. And it really kind of factors on a lot of the unique and different shelf that you have. And really one of the pet peeves, one of the disappointments that I have is being the #1 agriculture, or #2, depending on, who's counting, 1 or 2 agricultural counties in the United States, in Kern County. We don't have enough value-added foods or enough of those businesses that are processing with all the local commodities that we have. So really, it is one of the things that we hope to explore at another time. I don't know if there's a question in here, but I really want to look at that, and really have been fascinated by that, why we don't have more. And you see people generating stuff, in Bozeman, Montana, for example, agricultural commodities that are produced in Kern County.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. And what you see is, if you imagine the way the ag industry is set up, we do have a lot of large processors, your Grimm Waves, Bolthouse, Wonderful, and all these. So they typically contract out or buy from smaller producers or growers. So if I'm a grower of pistachio, all I do is grow the pistachios and then maybe have it processed, but then the rest of it is handled by the processors and such. So there is value added on the large scale, right? So if you look at the smoothies or the wonderful pistachios or the Bolthouse carrots and all these things, there is some value added, but it's done at that large scale rather than at the smaller scale. And I'm not so sure that at this moment it's profitable for a small grower who's maybe, let's say, has 100 acres or even like 400 acres to get into the value added business just because of the initial capital investment and such. So perhaps these value added grants might help, but then it's hard to compete with the larger processors on scale.
Good point. Good point. And it's me looking at everything with a small business lens. But there is a lot of our, we have 3 major, very large producers in Wonderful, Grimm Farms, and Bolthouse. And then a number underneath them, there are very large companies that are doing a lot of the value-added stuff that is impacting counties. But it's just not our small producers that are taking it away. So good point. Okay, let's go back and see if we've got anything to pick up in the Q&A. And if we do have a question or two that's been added. Okay, let's grab that last one. I understand that you may want to grow or export crops. What are the top imported crops? Ooh, that's a good question.
That is
top imported crops in California.
In California?
Let's make it broader.
In California, actually, it would be pretty similar, not the trees and nuts, but part of it is you have to remember that there's seasons to things that we grow.
Yeah.
So in the winter season, so perhaps even now where we're not growing or harvesting any fruit, then we would be importing that. So what you see is a lot of fruits and vegetables that are imported either from Mexico, again, depending on the time of year you're talking about, or primarily from Chile or Peru. So you're looking at like cherries, grapes. One of the things that more recently has happened is a lot of pears have been imported from Argentina. Part of it is the used to be that the Argentinian pears would come in when the California pears were not ready. A lot of the California pears are used for, yeah, they're canned or those processed. And then some are obviously fresh pears, but it's depending on the season. And so pears grow in California, Oregon, and Washington, and then depending again on the season. So they're harvested earlier in California, then Oregon, and then finally Washington. And so the pears from South America would fill that gap when these, but now because they've produced a lot and they store it and the way they can, using chemicals and stuff extend the shelf life, Argentinian pears are coming in when we're harvesting California, and one of the larger pear processors stopped buying some of the California pears, just business decisions. And so the pear industry in California has been really hurting because of that. So when you talk about imports, historically it's been to fill the gap between the harvest, but now it seems like it's kind of blending into where they're also exporting when our crops are ready to go to the market.
Yeah, and I think a really big point you mentioned there has been the transition over the last few decades. If you go back 20 and 30 years even, of fresh product being available around the globe, the globalization of fresh product compared to what used to be canned. And for example, in Lake County, they had a huge pear industry, and a lot of that relied on these pear packing sheds and also processing of canned pears and other canned fruits for cocktail, et cetera, which is largely diminished now by the importation of off-season fruit. So that's a great point. Hey, Doctor, we're running out of time here on Webinar Wednesday. I just wanted to thank you for coming on and
Thank you
for
for
being
having me.
here. We are actually here today because of some generous friends. Our friends' lounge and coffee today was provided by Bank of America. So big shout out to B of A and their Bakersfield president, Karen Zuber, and even their vice president, Andy Stanley. Thank you both for having this women's pavilion open to the public and for people like us at the World Ag Expo. We're here for Webinar Wednesday number 371, and that's going to wrap us up.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you, and I know you've got some big things happening this year and some great news, and we'll have you back. We'll have you back, and I'll have that picture of you with the steps, and I insist on it.
Sounds good.
Okay, so for Dr. Aaron Hegde, I'm Kelly Bearden. We'll be back with Webinar Wednesday number 372 next Wednesday on the 18th. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you then. Goodbye, everybody.